Good afternoon. I call to order the meeting of the GCC Board Meeting on March the 9th, 2021 at 4:46 p.m. Roll call, please. Board roll call. Mr. Anderson, not here at this moment. Mr. Block,
Here.
Mr. Mandrick,
Here.
Mr. Turner,
Present.
Lily Campbell, present. All board members, 4 board members are currently present at this point. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to our regular board meeting. It's so good to see all of Cabinet, Dr. McCormick, Ms. Thornberry, Mr. Sample, Dr. Peterson. Did I miss anyone? No, I didn't. And all of my 4 board members who are currently here. Thank you so much. And Mr. Marco, Melissa, our administrative assistant. Thank you for being here with us today. And so with that, and all of you who are joining us virtually, we thank you and we hope that you are with us and having a good afternoon. And so with that, we will move right into our board meeting. And let me please acknowledge our other board member, Mr. Anderson, Mark. Hello, Mark. You are here, Mark Anderson. Present. He's still on mute.
Sorry about that.
Welcome. We're so glad to see you and glad you're here. We'll talk a little more after we get into our comments. So thank you for being here. And so with that, we are ready to go into our regular agenda. Do we have public comments for today?
Madam President, there's no public comments that have came in.
Okay, no public comments that have come in. Thank you very much. Okay, and so we will move right into our superintendent's update. Dr. Peterson.
Thank you, President Campbell. Is it true that the last time we were together was at the retreat?
Yes.
All right, so definitely want to acknowledge the board for the great work at their mid-year retreat. We had a lot of great opportunity to discuss strategy and vision and the future. And I really appreciate the board for their best practice governance and the governance training. I want to affirm all of staff for their presentations as well. But certainly on the other side of the retreat, we've spent some time kind of, looking at that and really appreciating the board for the 2 days they spent together with us. So thank you, board, for that work. Want to give a shout out to some of our administrators. We, in the last year-ish, have undergone an issue where we have not had a lot of our in-person celebrations for ourselves or for the region, but we did have for 2020 a AXA Region 3 Administrator of the Year. Our very own Maury Elliott was Educational Options Administrator of the Year for last year's awards, but there wasn't a total award ceremony, so he didn't get to be honored publicly. So we want to affirm him for that. At the same time, we have 2 administrators from the GCC who are being honored for 2021 as Administrators of the Year. So we want to recognize Erin Marston, who's been named Region 3's Elementary Administrator of the Year, and our very own Tara Jones, who has been named Co-Administrator of the Year. And if we could do a standing ovation, I would, but all of us in the board and central office and throughout the GCC are so proud of all of our administrators, but certainly these 3, and we are wanting to really recognize you. So thank you for all of that you have done to receive such a wonderful award. You're going to hear some more in our session today about school reopening related to COVID-19. I will be so glad when we have an update that has nothing to do with COVID-19. It has ruled our world for so long, but I want to let you know that we continue with Cabinet to attend multiple state and local public health meetings. We are monitoring the ongoing changes and trends, and the fluid situation continues to be fluid. It continues to change from how they're going to name tiers to who gets a vaccine to what % of the vaccine goes to whom, and what is the cadence for testing. And, is it 6 feet or 4 feet? Everything around what we have done and are doing continues to change. While that is difficult, it is right in alignment with the goal, the motto for this year: dream, design, adapt, and persevere. And we're continuing to create those plans and adapting and persevering. I really want to give kudos out to Jason and Christine, who are the main two cabinet points for the COVID-19 response and information. Also want to definitely give a shout out to our nurses and our people who are supporting that, and HR also. There's just been so much that's been needed of so many more people, and everybody is stepping up to do their very best to serve during this time. I was able to get out for the first time, I think in a year, Jason Sample, and actually physically be on sites. I think the last time I was on sites was March of last year, I think. So Jason and I went out and did actually a on-site school visit at Higher Learning Academy and at Gateway International School. We practiced social distancing. We had our masks on. But we got to see actual children in seats and actual staff serving students. And it just really warmed my heart to see that we have great things going on in our schools. I know other members of cabinet have been out to other schools. It's my great hope that I get out to the rest of them in the very near future. We want to affirm today business services. You know that our very own CBO, Aaron Thornsberry, is amazing as always. But along with that, he had some support this year for second interim. As you know, we are still hiring our director of business services, and that person will come on board the end of the month. But in her, the absence of that role, staff members Yvonne Grazier and Sharon Lacomstein both stepped in to provide Aaron with support. So we want to affirm them for taking on extra duties to get us through the second interim that you're going to hear about later today. We also are doing deep planning around summer school. Each of our sites is creating a meaningful, deep, impactful program for the summer in order to deal with learning loss, social emotional learning, and meaningful instruction. Each of them will have their own pathway to that, but we certainly will be presenting those to you when we have more information. We want to let you know that we're exploring with HR and business services the ability to provide some stipends for those that are in fact providing in-person learning. So we will bring a proposal to you probably at our next board meeting as a way to recognize those that have been providing significant in-person instruction or support. And we believe that a stipend is worthy in that realm. We will do something similar, but not quite the same for summer school. We really want to incentivize and recognize that in-person learning and instruction and support right now takes a little bit more from people. And so we'll be bringing that in the same proposal. We're doing a lot, as we always do, with one of our key areas, which is learning and professional development. So the Leadership Development Academy has had their first 2 sessions. We had Leadership 101, and in the last space, we had leadership, going deeper into leadership, session 2 with Dr. McCormick and Mr. Sample and I going deeper into leadership. And then we have our 3rd session coming up where Jason Sample and Sergey Terepkov are going to go into equity and culturally responsible leadership or responsive leadership. So we're kind of excited about that. We had our next section of Leading While Female. A group of a dozen of us got together and spoke about the book Leading While Female, along with some other concepts that we brought into that discussion. It was very rich and meaningful. We also are in our Crucial Conversations cohort 24. I keep saying a different number, but I think it's 24. And we're in our 2nd or 3rd class for that. You know, many of these things or all of these things are happening through the Zoom platform still. Hopefully there'll be a point where we can do more in person, but right now we're utilizing our technology to the best of our ability. Lastly, we had a campfire session. You'll remember Campfire Sessions. Is this our 3rd campfire session, Jason? Okay. Campfire Sessions, we're going to have 4 this year, I believe, is a way to come around the campfire, put our arms out, and be warmed by the fire together, so to speak. And we had a couple of our consultants give us their time and energy, not on contract, just out of the goodness of their hearts. And that was Vern Hazard and Jeff Thorpe of the Flippin Group came and spoke about leading with heart. We're very honored that all of our partners who do the work with us always come on board to provide extra value whenever possible. So they were very well received by those who attended the campfire. This morning, I think it was this morning, because all this runs together, Miss Lily and I were with the EPIC team. EPIC, as you may remember, and this happened for GIS as well, just went through their MYP programs certification. So now they're going through their WASC certification. And while that seems a bit overwhelming to be going through 2 certifications, there's a lot of overlap between the 2 and a lot of ability to provide the same information in different ways to support those 2 ways of being certified. But Lily and Aaron Thornsberry and I had a good chance to talk to the WASC team about EPIC and about the GCC, and definitely want to affirm Miss Lily. She did a great job representing the board and governance. And we're looking forward to the outcome of the WASC, which we should hopefully get an informal report tomorrow afternoon. AXA legislative updates have been a part of our world. We've been discussing AB and SB 86, which did get signed by the governor on Friday. I think they eventually called it AB 86, even though there were 2 of them. And so another issue that's happening legislatively is we were told federally that we will do testing, despite the fact that we're not sure testing is a smart thing to be using our time on right now. But from a state level, we are still trying to get waivers on some of that. So we'll see how that plays out in terms of testing. AXA Superintendent's Council is still a place where I am showing up and getting a lot of really good support and feedback from AXA, and being able to share that out with the region as the council representative for our region. And it's very valuable. I really want to give an affirmation to AXA for the way they've been supporting in this year of difficult stuff. Cabinet, pretty much all of Cabinet attended the CSDC webinar on school reopening. Was that yesterday, guys? I think it was yesterday. And we got a lot of good information all about opening and the different funding sources, what we can do, what we can expect. And we're just managing that along with all the other overwhelm of information. One of the interesting things was to hear a little more about quote unquote ESSER 3 funding. So we have ESSER 2, we have ESSER, we had ESSER 1, and now they're, the big federal bill that is expected to be signed is expected to bring us ESSER 3 dollars. So we'll have Aaron Thornsberry talking more about humongous expenditures, I'm sure. So we want to remind you, we emailed you about the SIM Center. The SIM Center experienced a fire on its roof and its HVAC system. With that was a lot of water damage from the firefighters and the sprinklers putting the fire out. Our entire suite was 4 feet underwater. We do not yet know the complete story of loss. We do know we're not able to use the SIM Center, and we probably will not be able to even get in there for at least 2 months, according to our best information. We have been given 2 months of free rent, as I understand it, or 3 months of rent release. Maybe that's another way of saying it, because we're not able to use the center during that time. While the city has been willing to look at options for us, at this point, SAVA has decided to try to just provide their services, because they're primarily still in distance learning, through their other campus. And so we'll continue to update you on the SIM Center and its outcomes. Along that same line, we have across the last 3 years, 2 to 3 different times, attempted to negotiate for additional space at the Power Inn campus. You'll remember that right next door, where the Table Tennis Association used to be, we have tried a couple times to talk to that leaseholder about possibly expanding into some of that space. That's probably more important than ever with the SIM Center issue going on. And so we have made some movement on that, and believe that the new owner is allowing us to put in a letter of intent to try to expand into that space. And our next meeting, board meeting, will bring probably a lease agreement and next steps in terms of improving that building. And, you know, our thought is that this will allow us to utilize some of the grant funding we got from manufacturing and put in some of the manufacturing pathway stuff and other things that we haven't had space for in our current space. So we'll bring that back to you when we meet again. Also, just want to remind you that we are continuing to work with our partners at Hanover. You have a contract on the agenda today. We spoke to you about their work at the board retreat extensively, telling you about the equity work and social emotional learning work that we're doing with them. We reported out the survey on social emotional learning, and as well as the equity and the data use that we were using for equity work. Later in the agenda, more information will be presented on that. I think that's everything from my update. Mr. Sample, did I miss anything? So we're very, okay, we're very excited. A lot is going on. A lot is always going on, but excited to have so many more people back on campus, more students back on campus, excited to be watching the rate of pandemic going down, in the hopes that the more it goes down and the more the vaccines go up, the more we'll have a more quote unquote normal experience at our schools. So that's my report, Madam President.
Thank you so much. Board members, do we have comments, questions, or just comments? Anyone? Anyone? Seeing no hands, again, I will thank you for all of the hard work that all of you are doing as a cabinet and staff. So thank you. And we'll wait to hear some more of the things that you said will be coming to us. Thank you. And now, seeing no hands, we will now move into our study session. School reopening update. Who will lead us?
There
should be
we
Dr.
go.
McCormick and
Yeah.
Mr. Sample. That's right.
All right. Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, Dr. Peterson. Thank you so much, Dr. McCormick and myself are happy to once again just kind of share with you a little bit of an update of where we are in terms of our school reopening and the work that we're doing. And so we'll look forward to kind of taking you through this and then answering any questions that you may have. So the first thing that we always just kind of like to remind you or share with you of where we are, and that is basically where our status is in both Sacramento and Yolo County. I think if you've kind of been following the news, you know that overall in the state, we're beginning to see increasingly week after week a decline in our adjusted case rate. And so this week, when I say this week, as in of today, the Sacramento County, we still remain in the purple, but our adjusted case rate is 9.5, which is much lower than it was last week and just about half of what it was 2 weeks ago. So we're really seeing good strides in terms of our decrease. And then Yolo County is actually moved to the substantial or the red tier with an adjusted case rate of 4.0. And we'll share with you later on, as you may have heard, the governor has once again changed our tiered system based on the number of individuals that are being vaccinated. And that will also play into how the numbers in the future are adjusted. But right now, we're really excited to continue to see the downward trend in both Sacramento and Yolo County. Some of the highlights, and Dr. Peterson shared a lot of this with you in her report, but one of the things that we've been watching very closely is AB 86 or SB 86 at that time it was called. What was interesting is sometime in the legislature, they do this interesting move called the twin bills. And it's where they send two bills through both sides of the House, the Assembly and the Senate, with the hopes that you can really speed up the process. And then they, at the end, will collapse or they'll merge the two bills to become one. And so that's what happened here is we start off with twin bills in both houses that were merged. So AB 86 has been passed, signed, and chaptered. Once again, that is record movement in the California legislative system. Here are some of the highlights in this bill. The first one is that vaccines for school employees is prioritized, but is not required. That was a big part of the bill. April 1st deadline to offer in-person instruction was another part. The bill authorized $4.5 billion for learning recovery grants and $2 billion for in-person instruction grants. And then the bill also gave kind of a framework for the reporting and public health requirements, and once again, giving the county the ability to make some of those rules and changes and requirements, in regards to school reopening. For us, one of the things that we have been looking at, and it is some information that we want to share back with the board, and that is our vaccine rollout and support for our staff here within the GCC. Last week, we put a staff survey out to our entire staff. We had about 309 respondents. The survey was anonymous and confidential, again, because we're asking staff health questions. So this was completely anonymous, completely confidential. And the responses were representative of all the school sites as well as our central office. And so 71% of the respondents plan to take or receive the vaccine. 29% of the respondents do not plan to take, or at this time, quite honestly, they're undecided in terms of the vaccine. So they're still kind of going through their process. 65% of our respondents have received their first dose, with 12% of the respondents have received their second dose. So obviously the 65%, they have an appointment for their second, but only 12% of that group has received their second. And 23% of our respondents have not yet been vaccinated. We also asked any staff who was having difficulty getting those appointments to let us know so that we can work with them. We have been doing weekly as well as timely information that we share with our staff regarding vaccination clinics and opportunities for them to be vaccinated. As well as we've been partnering with our authorizers, CSDC, CCSA, SCOE, County Public Health for Sacramento and Yolo, as well as the Yolo County Office of Education, to get the vaccine information in the hands of our staff as fast as possible. And I will say, as Dr. Peterson shared, our authorizers, in particular Twin Rivers and San Juan, have been really good partners in communicating with us their various clinics, and a number of our staff have been able to take advantage of those opportunities. At this time, I'll turn it over to Dr. McCormick.
Thank you, Jason. So I thought we'd start with just sort of a conversation about what reopening can look like. We have been in this sort of phased reopening stage for a while, and I'm going to share some exciting news about where we are now. But that phased reopening was really about serving our younger students or students that had more specific needs or needed additional support, maybe weren't connecting with distance learning in the way we'd hoped. And we're moving with many of our schools into fewer students in a classroom together for what would look like in-person instruction with alternating days to keep our cohort small, but also keeping in mind that we're still giving our families options. So if they're not comfortable with bringing their students back to school, that we are still providing them a chance to participate in education via distance learning. Next slide. So where are we with schools opening? So, our shout out to Gateway International School, who have been open since October, K-8, but as of this week, opened kindergarten through 6th grade. We have CCCS Elementary, COA Elementary, 6th graders at COA Middle School, K through 6 at EPIC, and K through 6 at HLA. and excited on Monday because Yolo County is in the red tier. They can now bring their 7th and 8th graders back on campus. So Epic will be fully open K-8 on the 15th. And then pending our color status, and we are hoping to be able to move this forward very quickly, is we are looking at the rest of our schools being open. So CCCS being able to bring all the way through 12th grade, COA Middle School being able to add their additional 2 grades, as well as the same with HLA, Futures, and Sava bringing all their students back on campus. But those grade levels that aren't being served in-person learning right now are still participating in distance learning, or that phased reopening. I mentioned the smaller groups providing some in-person instruction if they aren't making progress or need extra support. Next slide. We shared these photos with you last time we were together, just to sort of remind you of all the great work our schools are doing and how much they miss their students. But we have some new ones to share on our next slide that we were able to get when we were out and about last week, as our schools were getting ready and some of them bringing students on board for orientation. Very exciting to see all the work in classrooms, and affirmations to all of our teachers and administrators for really thinking about how they can serve students, maintain social distancing, and being able to have as many students as they can fit. There's been some creative classroom design with using inside and outside spaces to get students on campus. Next slide. So as a follow-up to our board retreat there, I wanted to circle back and summarize some of the items that we have been using those learning loss mitigation funds for, but specifically to let you know that John DeMarco assisted us in doing some research, and we currently, since we went into the shelter-in-place order last March, we have onboarded 2,800 new Chromebooks to be able to serve our students, and we probably have 500 plus that are on order waiting to come in. It's been a supply chain challenge, but things are getting better, and we're starting to see them come in. So our partners at Twin Rivers, as well as John, have really been helping to move our technology forward so we can get it in the hands of students. But we've also been making sure we have filtration systems, looking at all kinds of different seating, and being able to provide all the signage that our school sites need to prepare for students returning. Next slide. And then before we move to questions, just where we're going with next steps. So as Dr. Peterson shared, we are working with the school principals to actively look at what summer school will look like, and then really making sure we're bringing students back, focusing on emotional as well as academic care. And I cannot take credit for this thought, but I was watching a keynote at the Aries conference this week, and he talked about how we need to look at reopening as also care opening, and about how we're going to build rapport, embrace our students in the new way, assist them with coming back on campus and conflicts that might have for them with understanding that we're moving from distance learning to a face-to-face environment, assist them to reintegrate, and then of course help them reflect on all the growth they've had, whether they were on campus or online with their teachers. So with that, we will move to our last slide, which would be any questions that we can answer for you.
Board members? Yes, Bruce.
One of the first slides you had was on the percentages of people that were saying that they were willing to take the vaccine and those that had taken it. And it looks like we're kind of hitting almost 100% of those who said that they were willing to take the vaccine. Although I'm sure the survey isn't 100% of the people that are out there, but it was like 71% of the people said they were willing to take the vaccine, and 65% of the people said they've already had some of the shots. So what kind of outreach are we doing in terms of trying to encourage that other 30% to come around and take the vaccine?
Bruce, let me just inject that there were out of the ones that you talked about, the 71% and 65, there were only 309 respondents. So the total group had not responded. We have about 5. How many staff do we really have? How many surveys were sent out? That's the first thing. And I'll answer your question.
So thank you. Yes, we have about a little bit over 500 staff members.
Right.
Of that group, again, 309 responded to the survey. Some of the things that we've been very intentional about doing is, every few weeks and sometimes every Friday, Dr. Peterson, she'll send out her Friday communication. There's always a part in there. Matter of fact, this week's had a part in there about, the vaccine and the importance of it. And, we try to share information with each of our staff. I will tell you, in terms of our numbers compared to what other charter leaders have reported in our various meetings, we're actually fairly high in terms of our respondent numbers of those who are taking advantage of the vaccine. And, we're going to keep educating. We're going to keep providing the information for those staff members that request it. We've even had, in some cases, our school nurses, people have had deeper questions. They've been able to ask our nurses. So we'll keep educating, we'll keep providing the information, but compared to kind of where some of our colleagues are, we really are doing pretty well.
Any other comments or questions from board members? Yes, Jack, Mr. Turner.
I appreciate the information on the number of Chromebooks. I asked that question at our retreat, and that is a significant number. I assume we'll utilize those Chromebooks long after we're all back, the students are back in the traditional classroom setting.
Well, one of the things we've certainly said is that education's not going to go back to looking the way it was before the pandemic. You don't turn on the hose of the internet and all the internet sources and all the internet learning and then go, give me the Chromebook back and here's a book. So yeah, we're going to have to find ways to incorporate it, Jack. That's a very good observation. I know Mark had his hand
Yes.
raised, Madam
Ms.
President.
Anderson.
And you might have covered this at the retreat, but we said summer school. Now, are we looking at all of our schools having a summer school format?
Every school will have a significantly more impactful program this coming summer. We just haven't designated what it will look like, but we've really tasked each principal to work with their campus to have something that's longer, more and more intense with more students this summer, but they're going to decide and they'll bring us the plan and we'll bring you those plans as well.
Okay, and I'm assuming in coterminous with the conversations we're having with the principals, they're having those same communications out to the parents, correct?
Yes, so they're trying to figure out interest, and how can they meet the needs of the families at the same time as meeting the needs of what the educators feel is a deep summer school program. So yes, they're trying to do both.
Thanks, Cindy. Appreciate it.
Dr. Peterson, I want to go back to one thing you mentioned, and I had written it down, the testing. You say we definitely will be doing some testing, because I thought I heard that the state superintendent was advocating for no testing this year. So could you just kind of give me a little more information on that, please?
And Christine may know a little more than with specifics, but what it was is that the entire state was, including Tony Thurmond, were trying to make the case that we shouldn't have to do the federally mandated testing to meet the federal mandates. But the Biden administration, I think with pressure from the many groups that feel like without testing, the achievement gap groups will not be represented. We will not really know how far apart these groups are, and that somehow that will hide a lack of service. I think that's kind of the energy behind why the federal decided to move forward with it. But I think we are, through Tony Thurmond's office and others, still asking for a waiver of some of that. Dr. McCormick, is that accurate?
Yes, and also looking at shortening. The tests have already been shortened, and even an extension of the timeline. So there's many components that California is looking at to try to best support the process.
Good. All right, thank you. Anything else for those two items? Seeing and hearing none. Okay, we will now move into our consent agenda items. And I will list those: adoption of the board minutes from our retreats, personnel consent agenda items, purchases over 30,000, Futures High School revised curriculum list, service agreement with Hanover Research, 2021 COVID-19 school guidance checklist, revised behavior intervention specialist job description. Those are the consent agenda items. I will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Move approval. May I have a sec? Yes, Bruce.
Second.
All right, discussion. Any discussion on any of the items, Mr. Block?
Yes, I want to discuss the Hanover, number 5.
All right, that's the service agreement with Hanover.
Yes,
Okay.
because I was looking at that and I kind of got concerned about it because I was comparing it with capturing kids' hearts. And I was looking at what we do with them and what's different between this and that. I'm sort of, somewhere I've lost something.
Can I explain the differences between the two, Mr. Block?
Okay.
So capturing kids' hearts at its base is something that we do in every classroom. So it starts out with classroom teachers, classroom sites, and it's a way that they create self-managing classrooms. And then we work to apply it in every other level. But its most important place is where it occurs in a classroom. It is how we create the structures of good things, the structures of relational capacity. We have a set of 4 questions we ask. So we really want to train every person on a site to be able to do that process and live that process. And then again, we keep applying it all the way up to where we are. And that's how we've achieved our national showcase status, of course. And we've been doing that for, I think, 9 years now. I think we're in our 9th year, but I don't know. It all rolls together for me. Now, the work with Hanover is completely different. The work from Hanover starts at the top, not the classroom. So the work with Hanover is with cabinet and the principals and the site administrators, training them to know deeper understanding of equity, and especially in our current world, how equity fits with learning loss and social emotional learning. We've added into that kind of the subcategory of math instruction, because math is an area we're weak across our schools. But their work is to take all of the research that's known to them as a nationwide entity working on these topics, to work directly with cabinet and the principals to go deeper on those areas of equity and social emotional learning and learning loss related to that, and to help us become more able to meet our strategic plan around diversity, inclusion, and equity. That's their work, which is very different than capturing kids' hearts work.
I agree with you. If I may, just to echo what you're saying, it's 2 different platforms. One is the training of staff, helping them to recognize what is needed in equity, what is needed in diversity, and how to see it in the classrooms on the campus. The other is Capturing Kids' Heart, is reaching out to the kids, reaching out to parents. Capturing Kids' Heart goes from the school to home and home back to school. So they are 2 different entities completely. And I really feel that both are needed, particularly the equity piece is needed very much so right now. If we didn't have that, I'm not sure where we would be at this point. So 2 different programs, but very much needed, both of them.
Yeah, I think that equity is something that we should be having for 50 years from now, since Brown versus Board of Education, but we haven't really put it to work. And this is what you're saying that, so what's the benefits going to be on this?
Well, the Hanover work, let me tell you something that Jason and I, even when he was a board member, attempted to lead the equity work ourselves.
Mhm.
And as the board will recognize from our last retreat and our strategic plan, we're just spread too thin and we're not experts in that area. We didn't find that we were able to make the impact and broaden it in the way that we had hoped for because we were spread too thin. And so what came after that was the board adopted equity policy and equity plan, I think over a year ago. And that equity, diversity, and inclusion plan, we wanted to get real with it. And again, we didn't have the capacity inside or enough bandwidth, if you will. And so that's when we were introduced to Hanover through an AXA contact at an AXA superintendent symposium, I believe. And they are experts in this area. So what they did in the first year is they did a book study on building equity with us to just start everybody to have the whole administrative team and their leadership team have general understanding of what equity is, because we needed to start at a baseline. And then we went from there into talking about what does it mean to look at your equity? What data should you look at? When we went to that stage, we understood that people didn't quite know how to look at their data for equity. So then we had to train them on what does that mean? And Hanover was involved in all of this, and they were really great partners to meet with Dr. McCormick and Mr. Sample and I regularly to say, no, let's shift over here because we need more of this. Okay, they're not ready, let's go over here. So they just continually gave us the next step and let us respond to the next step. So they did the book study, they did the the admin retreat. They did, I think, 3 different virtual in-depth workshops with the administrators and their leadership team. They did the social emotional learning survey with us to help us get that data back. Dr. McCormick, what am I missing? Is that most of it?
Yeah, they helped them develop their SMARTY goals and move to their equity action plans, which will then be embedded into their LCAPs that will for the new LCAP process.
So those are all things that we did in the first year, and then moving into this next year, we want to build on all of that and go further in what we got out of our SEL survey, which was we need more trauma-informed instruction. I think was one of the big things that came up. And we're going to build on how to look at data and what to do about it. And then the math instruction and how that fits in the equity lens is part of it. And along with the whole learning loss issue, especially with subgroups around equity and culture. We have a lot to accomplish together. And what I really appreciated about Hanover is, yes, they're always bringing resources, sometimes more than I can absorb, but they're also always willing to shift. When we say, no, I don't want A, I want a B and a C instead, they're always willing to shift with us for what we feel like we need and can manage. So I must tell you, they've been a wonderful partner, very responsive. Both Madam President and Director Block, you are right, we need to do equity. I wish we were farther along in our equity work, but I feel like Hanover is a partner that will continue to move us on that continuum. And it is correct and important for every reason, but it's also incredibly important politically as we move into all of our renewals and ensure our authorizers the excellence with which we are attempting to address diversity.
May I say this? When we went into Capturing Kids' Hearts, we had consultants who came out and spoke with the board. I'm just wondering if we need to have someone to do some information to the board so we can understand better the importance of it, why we are doing this, and how it's going to benefit our students and staff. And that's just the thought.
If it is the board's pleasure, Hanover would be more than willing to come answer questions related to that. If you looked at the 2 different things that were attached to this item, the one was the proposal, which had quite a bit around the different blocks of what we're going to do in terms of work, but they could address questions you have about that, and they could answer questions, that's totally up to the board. We'd
Right.
certainly make it happen if it's something the board would desire.
Yeah, the one thing I really touched on, and that was my thing, the benefits of our students. What's gonna, I'm looking at what benefits will they, to make a whole student, because we're looking at that. You have to change people's hearts and souls and minds in order to do this. So that's going to be something in this where we can make, because if you can't change their mind or way they teaching and what they're doing, then it's going to be for naught.
I think that we are not believing that Hanover is our entire answer or our entire action plan. They're addressing the things we need to do to identify where learning is not happening equitably. And then we're creating action plans to create equitable opportunity. So facing opportunity gaps for those. That's where the student will be most benefited by. But we're not only doing that, Harry. We are, in fact, addressing equity in other ways as well, okay? So in our equity plans, our principals are ensuring that they are looking at learning loss by subgroups. They are looking at how they are addressing trauma-informed instruction, particularly for our subgroups. We understand that our strategic work around equity, diversity, and inclusion and meeting the needs of every student like you are describing is broader than just what Hanover is doing. Another thing that I know Mr. Sample is working on is he has researched what we believe is a step one training. We haven't done a lot of training throughout the entire GCC on issues of equity, at least in the sense of saying this one way everybody will do this, right? We've said you'll do it, how do you want to achieve it? But we're going to do an implicit bias training this spring. We are working on it already, and we're going to have every campus do an implicit bias training. Jason, do you want to speak to that briefly?
Yes. So, one of the things that we looked at is that you have to do this training across with everyone because everyone touches the student, from the teacher to the clerk to the custodian to the after school staff. And so we're looking this spring to have this training done organization-wide, and not only our school sites, but also for our central office staff, just to begin to really have the deep conversation around implicit bias.
I like that.
So I think that those are the ways it's not the perfect answer, Harry, and it's not the whole answer, but those are ways we're beginning to take those baby steps towards what you're asking for. Yes, we want to impact every student. We want to impact belief systems. We want to help people be more open-minded and understanding, but we're hitting it from a number of different areas. Hanover is a big piece of it, but the actual action at the school site level, we're ensuring that's happening as well in a variety of ways.
Okay. Yes, Mark. Oh, I see Mark and then Jack. Mark.
So I think it's an excellent idea to do an overview with the board from Hanover. I really think we need a deeper dive into understanding their program and their deliverables and how they plan to assist us with this. So I'm all in favor of seeing something like that happen in the not too distant future.
Great. Jack?
Yes, I strongly support the equity learning process. I had, with Jason and Cindy, I had raised some concerns about the contract that we were signing with them, and they were able to get the agreement revised that would allow to ensure that the board could come back and revisit our relationship with Hanover at a year from now. And I think that's fine. I think that gives us an opportunity to get another year of input and to get an evaluation of how the program is working.
Great. Okay. Yes, Bruce? Mr. Mandrick?
I'm not a big fan of contracting out things that are fairly routine, things that you can handle in-house, develop people to handle in-house. But I am a fan of using contracts to bring in expertise, which you don't need every day, but you need to have available on over a period of time. And I'm also in favor of using contracts to bring in things that are really timely. And I think the equity issues right now are really a timely issue that I think everyone's behind the curve on. And using a contract to bring us up to speed, I think can be really helpful to get us to the point, okay, at some point, maybe we don't need a contract to carry forward because we've trained our people to do that. But you don't have the in-house expertise or the bandwidth, as you say, to be able to just develop that in-house without the expertise. So contracts, I think, can be very valuable as long as you don't use them to just contract out things you could be doing internally. So I think this is a good contract.
Very good. Hearing no other comments, we do have a motion on the floor. And the motion is to approve the consent agenda items if there's no other discussion on any of the items. So I will do roll call for approval or disapproval. Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Block?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Mandrick?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Campbell? Yes. The consent agenda items have been approved unanimously. So thank you very much, Board. And that was a great discussion on the Hanover project. Thank you very much for your insights and thoughtfulness. Mr. Mandrick.
Yeah, I would just like to echo what has already been said. I'd really like to hear more about their programs at some future board meeting.
Yes.
We will talk. I'm going to ask Christine McCormick to work with me to address that with Hanover and see about their availability, whether it be the next board meeting or the one after. Based on their availability, we'll bring you something to the board.
And that's fine, whatever time is available, just something to put on the agenda in the back. Could even be at a retreat or something like that. So, it doesn't necessarily have to be at the next board meeting, but just to put in place. And like I say, it could be at one of our retreats or coming up soon. So thank you very much.
Also, in terms of Harry's concern, I want to reiterate what you said about this being a good discussion and a respectful discussion, and appreciate it and want to meet the board's needs. But Director Block, if you have more concerns around our approach for equity and other things we're doing, I know myself, Dr. McCormick, Mr. Sample, we're more than willing to meet with you one-on-one and talk about the various steps we're taking in our equity, diversity, and inclusion plan. If there are more questions that you have, please let us know.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, I will. And I have to echo Jack's statement because I had some concerns, but after I saw the new contract, I was okay with.
Okay. And with that, we are now moving into the area of business. Approve the second interim revised budget and financial report. And Mr. Thornsberry.
I've already said so many nice things about Mr. Thornsberry today. I don't know if I can feed his ego much more, but I do want to, once again, because we have a little different audience right now than earlier. When I tell people that we have 9 budgets, 9 LCAPs, 9 LEA plans, 9 audits, they basically think that Aaron walks on water to be able to manage all that. So I always like to make sure that people understand what a treasure we have and how hard Aaron has worked, and a little more maybe for this second interim without his Director of Business Services, who will be on soon. So anyway, I just want to affirm you, Aaron. Thank you for all of your hard work on our behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'd just like to also thank Yvonne and Sharon for what they've helped to put into this without the director, and some changes that have been happening in the department. So appreciate that, and I will take it away with the presentation here. So our second interim report, it's required for all local education agencies, and it's due March 15th. So we are well ahead of schedule, which is also really great. And what it's going to, the second interim report compares the original budget, the current first interim budget, and what we're proposing for the second interim. And it also compares it to the actuals to January 31st. And we also turn in to the oversight agencies with it multi-year projections and cash flow projections as well. Just a quote, change is the only constant in life. And that kind of sums up really the budget process, constantly changing, especially this year with the pandemic. Just so many changes in revenues and even some of the expenses that we're seeing. Some expenses are less and some are more with the pandemic. So P2ADA, normally we would have a revision for you at this time of the year to go over how we're monitoring our attendance and throughout the schools and how it's maybe changing, and we change those assumptions. But since we're funded on the prior year ADA this year, and because a couple of the schools were able to apply for growth funding, and they've received that was approved, their growth funding, futures and HLA, because they actually had growth in enrollment. And the state used a formula to calculate based on the statewide average attendance. So all these numbers are really locked in. So our P2ADA is not changing from the first interim. So it's still at 4,855 ADA. Now, the unduplicated pupil percentage, though, that is a fact. That's how we determine our supplemental and concentration grant portion of the LCFF funding. That was not, we did not have a hold harmless on that. And so we had a first interim budgeted assumption. And then for second interim, we finally had the CalPADS submissions turned in at the end of December, and had the final numbers for the free and reduced English language learners and foster youth that make up this percentage. And unfortunately, we saw a downward trend in this. And I think there were a couple, issues going on. First was we did have a lot of data cleanup this year. Now that we have a director of data, and Paula, really went through and worked hard to really clean up the data. And another thing too is that a lot of districts are experiencing a downward trend in these numbers because being in the pandemic, it's harder to collect free and reduced lunch forms. It's harder to get parents to come out and, since there's free meals everywhere, there's no incentive to really turn these forms in. And so a lot of school districts are seeing a decline in these numbers. We're hoping to see that the state may help in this area, but they've really been kind of resistant to having a hold harmless in this area for now. So that unfortunately will have a downward trend on our supplemental and concentration grants. So you can see here, two of the schools pretty much remain the same, GIS and EPIC. They really didn't move much. But you could see some of these other schools had up to, a 6% decrease. And so we also are going to be discussing with the school sites how we can really try to, for next year, increase that participation and getting those forms and letting them know how important this is to get these free and reduced lunch forms collected. So our general fund revenues for all the schools combined is actually growing quite a bit, almost $5 million from the first to second interim. So despite the LCFF, so the supplemental concentration grant, unfortunately, that is going to be a $757,000 decline across all the schools combined because of those lower counts of unduplicated pupils. But the federal government has come in now with the, they recently announced and approved at the end of December the ESSER 2 grant. And because of that, our federal revenues are estimated to go up $5.7 million. And those funds can be, we have about 2 years to spend those funds. But the nature of that grant is we would record the revenue from it in this year and then spend it out towards the end of the grant period. And so those are the two major contributors to this increase. Oh, and one other thing that I wanted to mention too is that the recent SB 98 funding is not included in this budget just because it was just approved on Friday. So that will, when we come back around again to probably talk about the estimated actuals at the end of the year, those funding sources also will be added in and it will increase the other state revenues. Our general fund expenses, we had we're estimating almost $1.3 million decrease in expenses. And the reasons for this is we didn't, at this point in time, we didn't get the increased summer school plans included in the budget. We're still in the process of developing the summer schools. And it's probably likely that certificated salary number and classified salaries that you saw here going down, those will probably get, come back around and get reversed once we know more about that. But this is based on the current trends that we've seen. We had to take out, there was a lot of, throughout the year, and we hadn't removed it yet, really just when we originally developed the budget, we have kind of typically like, after school programs and stipends and things that, that you'd see in a traditional after school classroom based type of environment. And we just weren't seeing that throughout the year. And so we reduced those salary lines a little bit. Benefits kind of goes along with the salaries with those reductions. Books and supplies, we reduced $278,000. We still had a lot of amounts that were budgeted in our supplemental concentration grant for furniture, technology, things like that, that were still sitting there. But on the other hand, we were using the budgets from the Coronavirus Relief Fund and ESSER grant to purchase a lot of technology. And so we still had kind of two pots of money still sitting there for furniture and equipment. So we really kind of started to reduce the supplemental concentration because we just don't see that they're spending that now that they've spent, now the schools have spent their budgets in those one-time pandemic grants for their needs in those, in technology and in other areas of the school. Services and other operating, this is a drop of $356,000. And a lot of that is just cutting back, it was still sitting all the way up through first interim. This hope that we're going to have travel and conferences again, field trips, professional development costs, those were still sitting in there. And so now we're just making those adjustments to take those out because that's just not likely going to happen by the end of the year. We Also, we had some lower equipment rent this year, and slightly lower, just adjusting the utilities back a little bit. Capital outlay decreased. It was previously overestimated, but kind of at the last minute, this door project at Futures High may actually bump that back up to where it was. So we'll probably see that maybe by the end of the year that kind of come back up. Fund balance. First interim, our change in fund balance was about a positive $2.5 million, ending at about $30.6 million. So our second interim, because of the increased, funding mostly from this ESSER 2 funding, we're going to see an ending balance now of almost $36.9 million, with a change of $6.2 million increase to the ending balance. Now, I showed this here. This bottom part is the components of the ending fund balance, and how you can see in the first interim, most of this money at the ending fund balance is unrestricted, can be used really for any purpose within our schools, and the restricted portion is really small, only 500,000. But now, really with these changes, now the restricted balance is way up to 5.6 million because of these federal pandemic relief grants, and the unrestricted just bumped up about 1.1 million. So all this increase has strings attached, has to be spent for specific purposes. It's one-time money. It's not just something that we can just throw in the bank account and use it later for anything. So we have to be careful with them. Just to go over some of the risks, here and maybe for the next few years. The Lcf revenue, it's projected to, the cost of living increases in our multi-year projections, or with the exception of next year, going out the next 2 years, it's going to be below 2% is what the projections are showing. And also what's not listed here on the slide is that, fortunately, because if our supplemental and concentration grants are going down, if we can't, that unduplicated pupil percentage is here to stay at a lower rate, that's pretty much going to offset the cost of living adjustments upward on the LCFF, unfortunately. So hopefully, that number is just a temporary blip, and we can, get that back to where it was, but we're not certain of that at this point. As we've kind of seen already, the result of the pandemic, student enrollment and ADA declines, we're seeing that in some of our schools like EPIC, even maybe COA to some degree. Students have shifted to maybe homeschooling, migrating out of state, and we have a hold harmless this year, but we're going to see if that doesn't rebound, we're going to see a funding cliff in a couple of our schools, a few of our schools. And luckily we are getting some of these federal relief dollars that may bridge some of that gap, but that is something to look out for. STIRS and PERS costs, they're going to still continue to increase over the next few years. STIRS, I think, has a temporary, it'll be flat or kind of decline next year slightly, but then it ramps right back up in 2 years from now. And the El Dorado Charter Special Education Local Plan Area, we've added 2 more schools now into that, and we're directly responsible for everything related to special ed, and we could see a significant increase in those costs if, depending on the enrollment we have in our special education programs, depending on the needs of those students. And I think that is all for the presentation.
Okay. All right.
Madam President, can I
Yes.
ask Mr. Thornsberry, Would you put your presentation back up and go to the unduplicated slide?
Yes. Let me
So
go.
we've discussed this slide, which has got a significant impact, 757,000, I think you said. But I just want to make sure that I understand it. We are capped at what our authorizer cap is. So while let me look at the biggest one. Which one has the most percentage? So like I don't know, the 87.58%, the COA. Oh, okay, there we go. Epic. Epic has 88%. What does aren't we using the Twin Rivers percentage of?
So Twin Rivers is actually estimating, I think, at 90 at least.
Okay,
at
all
the-
right.
Yeah, for second interim, so we're under it.
Okay, when will we know for sure what their unduplicated is to know? So we're projecting that since our different caps have gone down this much, but they're still under the allowable cap if Twin Rivers is at 90.
Yeah.
That it is a loss. But if Twin Rivers also experienced an issue like ours where they didn't get the paperwork and such in, if their
Yeah.
percentage is lower, then would we still see this much difference?
Well, I think it would have to go down. I mean, getting down below the Epic and COA there. I mean, it could impact Epic and COA. If it were to drop 2%, 3%.
We might have even more loss. We're not going to see more revenue, but we might have less revenue if that cap comes in lower, like ours has come in lower. I'm not projecting a problem. I'm seeking to understand. And then my other thing was, you mentioned that now all of our schools are in the El Dorado County Special Education SELPA. And is this next year, I know you're not going to see it right here, but in your multi-year, in the next year, we will finally be accessing all the federal dollars, because in the first year of each of those schools being in, we didn't get the federal part of it, right?
Right. Yes, that's correct. I think there's 3 schools that will get the federal grant, that don't have the federal grant this year, but it will receive it next year.
Next year. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. Thank you for your patience with my questions, madam.
Okay, Mr. Mandrick, and then Mr. Turner.
And great work. I really would like to add what Cindy said earlier, that I really appreciate the fact that you have 9 school districts you're dealing with. But going back to that slide again on the unduplicated count percentages, just a minor technical question. On the totals, we're showing decreases in most of the schools, and yet the second interim actually has an increase as a total. I'm not understanding that.
Yeah, that actually, so I think this is, I'm sorry, this should have been labeled the Twin Rivers. This is
okay. That would make way more sense.
That's the Twin Rivers is 90.56.
So
there's no total, you can't total.
Okay.
So yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I did not notice that one.
Jack, did I see your hand? Mr. Turner, yes.
Aaron, absolutely a fine presentation, and appreciated looking at the second interim. I have a question about summer school, which I strongly support. Is the state funding the ADA for summer school?
It's not ADA, right? It's all the learning loss dollars, right?
Right. I mean, the SB 86 that was just announced, it's not driven off of ADA. No.
Okay.
They're just they're funding based off of I believe it's kind of based off the supplemental and concentration grants that we've received, and maybe even Title I, some degree, is how they're allocating those funds out to the schools, and based off of.
Will it be attendance driven? Student numbers?
No, it's not like we take attendance every day in summer school and turn it in, and that's how we're funding.
We get the money no matter how we structure the summer school.
No matter, okay. And just finally, the other thing is sometime in a follow-up board meeting, once we know how the legislature's bill, the governor's support the incentive program, you might get a little more specifics about what they plan to bring in. And I really agree, as you've heard this over the years from me, the issue of declining enrollment is always the major one. And that's certainly, I appreciate your concern and really looking at that.
So I think there are two things we'll bring back, if I understand it right, at a next, not maybe the next meeting, but soon in the future. It would be the impacts of SB 86, which is the state level, and then the newest federal money, which is quote unquote being called ESSER 3. Probably both of those at some point, Jack, we'll have Aaron bring back and discuss how much it is per school and what. I know that we have to adopt a plan for ESSER $3, I believe it is, if not for SB 86, maybe there's two plans of how we're going to spend that money and meet the objectives. So you're definitely going to see it more than once. So you'll get lots of information.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands or hearing no other questions or comments. Thank you again, Aaron. And would you please tell those who've been working with you how much we really appreciate the report and all of the information. And I know, thank you. We got a round of applause for you and the staff who've been working. Thank you so much. And now we have, I will entertain a motion to accept the second interim budget and financial report. Entertain, yes, Bruce?
So moved.
So
A
moved.
second.
Second. Any other discussion? Seeing no hands, I will do roll call. Okay, Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Block,
Yes.
Mr. Mandrick,
Yes.
Mr. Turner,
Yes.
Campbell, yes. The interim report, financial report has been accepted unanimously. Thank you again, with our accolades to you and your staff. So with that, we will move on to board comments. That's where we are at this time. Any board comments from anyone? Yes, Mr. Anderson, Mark.
I just wanted to publicly thank all of you for your condolences with my mom's passing, and really appreciated getting the Peace Lily. Very nice. Thank you so much for your understanding.
Thank you, and we're glad you're here with us tonight. We did miss you at the board retreat, but we understood, and we hope that you're finding contentment and peace with the memories of your mom. As you heard, Dr. Peterson mention that Ms. Thornsberry and the three of us were at a WASC meeting today for EPIC, and it was very, very good. I think we're going to get a good report from that. So it was nice to be able to sit in on that meeting and hear some good things already said about the school. So that was the only thing that I've done this for a while. So that was great. Any other comments from any of the board members? Any other? Seeing, hearing none. Okay, our next board meeting is March the 23rd at 4:45 p.m. And asked to give you a reminder that the spring break is March the 29th through April the 2nd.
Can I also add into your thinking
Yes.
that cabinet came together today about our June dates, and I'm just putting this into your back of your mind because I'll have Melissa follow up. But we currently have a June 8th and a June 22nd, which we are going to honor and keep. But we may be proposing to you that we also need a brief meeting on Friday, June 25th in the middle of the day. Friday, June 25th at noon, in order to, in that week, meet our obligations for LCAP and budget adoptions and meet our authorizer expectations. So if you would make a note, June 25th would be an extra date, special board meeting, probably around noon, but if we could get a consensus for a different time, we'll make what time works. But I will have Melissa follow up by email. It's
Okay.
quite a ways out, but we wanted
Quite a
you to be
ways
able
out,
to
yeah.
plan. Okay.
Already talking about the end of school year, my goodness.
I know.
Yeah. Anything else, board members or staff or cabinet for the good of the organization? Anything else? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. Do I see a hand?
Move to
So
adjourn.
moved.
Move to adjourn, so moved. Thank you. All in favor? Voting sign
Aye.
aye. Thank you.